Close your eyes for a moment. Imagine a cold morning in 1241. A Polish knight kneels in the mud, his armor dented, his sword broken. Around him, the ground is soaked red. He clutches a letter he will never send home. His wife will wait by the window every evening for years, watching the road, hoping. His daughter will grow up drawing pictures of a father she barely remembers. In 3 minutes, he will be dead. In 3 hours, his entire unit will vanish from history. They called the enemy the Devil's Horsemen. They came from the edge of the world, moving faster than any army Europe had ever seen. They did not march. They flowed like water. They did not fight like men. They fought like a storm. This knight, this father, this husband, he never stood a chance. But here is what they will never tell you. Somewhere in the chaos, in the blood and the screaming, Europe learned something. A secret written in the bodies of 10,000 men. A lesson so brutal, so complete, that it would save the entire continent. You are about to witness the moment when the unstoppable force met something it could not break. This is not just history. This is the story of how civilization survived by the thinnest of threads. And if you scroll past this, you scroll past the men who bought your future with their blood. Watch. The year is 1206. In the vast steppes of Mongolia, a man named Temujin unites the fractured tribes under a single banner. He takes a new name, Genghis Khan, the Great Khan. Within 2 decades, his armies will carve out the largest contiguous land empire the world has ever seen, stretching from the Pacific Ocean to the doorstep of Europe. But this is not a story about conquest for glory. This is a story about a military machine so perfectly designed, so ruthlessly efficient, that it seemed sent by the gods themselves to punish the world. The Mongol warrior was not born. He was forged. From the age of 3, a Mongol child learned to ride. By 5, he could shoot a bow from horseback. By 10, he could survive alone in the wilderness for weeks. By 15, he was a weapon. The Mongol horse was small, ugly, and seemingly weak compared to the great war horses of Europe. But it could run for days without tiring. It could survive on grass that would kill other horses. It needed no grain, no stable, no rest. Each Mongol warrior traveled with 3 to 5 horses, rotating them constantly. While European knights crawled across the land at 15 miles per day, the Mongols covered 80, sometimes 100. They did not wear the heavy plate armor of European knights. They wore layers of hardened leather and silk. Light, flexible. Arrows that would pierce mail often slid off silk or got caught in its fibers. They carried composite bows made of wood, horn, and sinew. Bows so powerful they could pierce armor at 200 yards. Bows that took a lifetime to master. Every Mongol warrior was an archer. Every Mongol warrior was cavalry. There was no infantry, no supply train, no slow baggage carts. They moved like a wolf pack, fast, silent, everywhere at once. Their tactics were not European. They did not form shield walls. They did not charge in glorious frontal assaults. They did something far more terrifying. They moved. A European army would see the Mongols approaching. A dark line on the horizon. The drums would beat. The knights would lower their lances. The charge would begin, and then the Mongols would vanish. They would split, flow around the flanks, fire arrows from a distance, retreat, regroup, attack from another angle. They would pretend to flee, drawing the enemy into a chase, stretching their lines, exhausting their horses. Then they would turn, encircle, destroy. They used terror as a weapon. When a city resisted, they killed everyone. Every man, every woman, every child, every dog. They built pyramids of skulls as warnings. They sent messengers ahead to the next city. Surrender and live. Resist and die. Most surrendered. The Mongol intelligence network was astonishing. They knew the politics of every kingdom, the feuds between nobles, the weaknesses of walls, the location of supply depots. They sent spies years in advance. Merchants, travelers, monks. By the time the Mongol army arrived, they knew everything. In 1236, the Mongols turned west. A force of perhaps 150,000 warriors, led by Batu Khan, grandson of Genghis. Their target was Europe. First, they smashed through the Russian principalities. Kiev, the jewel of the Rus, fell in 1240. The Mongols burned it so completely that travelers 50 years later reported it was still in ruins. Then they turned toward Hungary and Poland. Europe had no idea what was coming. The medieval European military system was built on the knight, a heavily armored warrior on a massive warhorse. Knights were the tanks of their age. Expensive, powerful, nearly invincible in a close fight, but slow, inflexible, trained for one kind of combat, the honorable charge, the glorious melee, the single combat between heroes. The Mongols did not care about honor. They cared about winning. In early 1241, the Mongol army split into two. One force moved into Poland, the other into Hungary. This was not reckless. This was coordinated. They communicated over hundreds of miles using relay riders. Each force knew exactly what the other was doing. The Polish force moved first. Towns fell. Armies scattered. Refugees flooded west, bringing stories of demons on horseback. Stories no one believed. On April 9th, 1241, a combined force of Polish knights, German crusaders, and Templar warriors met the Mongols near the town of Legnica. The Europeans were confident. They had heavy cavalry, disciplined infantry, got on their side. The battle began with a Mongol retreat. The Europeans charged. The Mongols fled. The Europeans pursued. They chased the Mongols for miles. Their formation broke apart. Their horses tired. And then the Mongols stopped running. From both sides, from behind, fresh Mongol units appeared. The Europeans were surrounded. The arrows came like rain. The knights, in their heavy armor, could not maneuver. They could not retreat. They died in the mud. The Duke of Silesia was killed. His head was paraded on a spear. The Mongols cut off the right ear from every corpse. They filled 9 large sacks. A grim tally of the dead. 2 days later, 300 miles to the south, the Mongols destroyed the Hungarian army at the Battle of Mohi. King Bela of Hungary commanded perhaps 15,000 men. Knights, infantry, crossbowmen. They camped near a river, behind fortifications. They felt safe. In the night, the Mongols built a bridge downstream in complete silence. At dawn, they attacked from 2 sides. The Hungarians were trapped against the river. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. 65,000 Hungarians died. The king barely escaped with his life. Europe was paralyzed with terror. The Mongols had destroyed 2 major armies in 2 days. They had proven that European military might meant nothing against their speed and tactics. The roads to Vienna, to Germany, to Italy were open. The Mongols could have kept going. They could have ridden all the way to the Atlantic. And then they stopped. In December 1241, news reached Bada Khan. The great Khan Ogdi, son of Genghis, was dead. Mongol law required all princes of the blood to return to Mongolia to elect a new Khan. Bada withdrew. Europe was saved by chance, by politics, by luck. But this is not where the story ends. Because Europe learned, and when the Mongols came again, they would find something different. The Mongols did not immediately return to Europe. They turned their attention east, toward China, toward Persia. But their shadow remained. European commanders studied what had happened. They read reports. They questioned survivors. They began to understand that the old ways of fighting would not work against this enemy. The key was simple. Do not fight the Mongols in the open field. Deny them mobility. Force them into sieges. Starve them. Bleed them. The Mongol strength was speed and maneuver. Take that away, and they were just men. Dangerous men, but mortal. European kingdoms began to invest in fortifications. Stronger walls. Better castles. Stockpiles of food and weapons. They trained infantry to fight defensively. Crossbowmen who could hold a line. Pike formations that could stop a cavalry charge. They learned to resist the urge to chase. To hold discipline under arrow fire. To wait. In the 1260s, the Mongols came again. This time, the target was not Europe, but the Middle East. The Mamluk Sultanate of Egypt stood in their way. The Mamluks were former slave soldiers. Warriors trained from childhood. They had studied the Mongols. They knew what to expect. In 1260, at the Battle of Ain Jalut in modern-day Israel, the Mamluks met the Mongol army led by Kitbuka. The Mamluks used Mongol tactics against them. They feigned retreat. They lured the Mongols into rough terrain. They ambushed them. They won. It was the first major defeat of a Mongol army in open battle. The myth of invincibility was broken. In 1280s, the Mongols invaded Eastern Europe again. Small raids, probing attacks. They hit Poland, Hungary, and the edges of the Holy Roman Empire. But this time, the castles held. The cities did not open their gates. The knights did not charge recklessly into the steppe. They stayed behind walls. They forced the Mongols to besiege. Sieges required time. Time meant supplies ran out. Time meant disease. Time meant the rapid Mongol war machine ground to a halt. The Mongols were masters of the open plain. But Europe was not an open plain. It was forests, rivers, mountains, castles, roads that turned to mud in spring, winters that froze men and horses alike. The further the Mongols pushed into Europe, the more difficult the terrain became. Their horses, bred for the steppe, struggled in the dense forests of Poland and Germany. Their supply lines stretched thin. They could not live off the land as easily as in the open grasslands of Russia or Hungary. And Europe was not unified, but it was dense. A Mongol army could destroy one kingdom and find another waiting just beyond. Each castle had to be taken, each city besieged. Each victory cost time and blood. The Mongols were brilliant, but they were not infinite. Every man lost was a man who could not be easily replaced. The steppes of Mongolia were thousands of miles away. There is one more thing. The Mongols were not stopped by a single battle. They were stopped by attrition, by adaptation, by the slow grinding reality that Europe was simply too difficult to conquer and hold. After the great raids of the 1280s, the Mongols never seriously threatened Europe again. They had easier, richer targets to the south and east. China, Persia, India. Europe was poor, divided, and hard to reach. It was not worth the cost. But there is one battle that symbolizes the turning point. One moment where European forces met the Mongols head-on and proved that they could win. It happened in 1285, in Hungary again. The Mongols returned, hoping to finish what they started decades earlier. King Ladislaus of Hungary assembled his forces. He did not meet the Mongols in the open field. He harassed them, burned the countryside, denied them supplies. He fortified the river crossings. He used the terrain. And when the Mongols finally retreated, harassed by Hungarian cavalry and unable to secure enough food for their horses, it marked the end. The Mongols would raid again, but never in such strength. Never with the same confidence. The European knight learned to fear the Mongol archer. But the Mongol learned something too. That speed and terror alone were not enough. That every land had its own logic, its own ways of fighting back. Europe was saved not by heroism, but by walls. Not by charges, but by patience. Not by glory, but by survival. The Mongol invasion of Europe was a near apocalypse. A brush with a force that had destroyed every other civilization it touched. But Europe adapted. It survived. It learned. The knights who died at Legnica did not die for nothing. Their deaths taught the men who came after. Do not fight the Mongols on their terms. Change the game. Make them fight on yours. The Mongol cavalry crashed into Europe like a tidal wave. They shattered armies. They burned cities. They filled rivers with bodies. But they did not conquer. They could not hold. Europe was too stubborn, too fortified, too far from the steppes. The Mongols were stopped not by a single hero or a miraculous battle, but by stone walls, muddy roads, thick forests, and the quiet determination of men who refused to surrender. The legacy of the Mongol invasions is not defeat. It is adaptation. Europe learned that survival sometimes means refusing to fight the battle your enemy wants. It means waiting, enduring, outlasting. The Mongols taught Europe a lesson written in blood. And Europe, in turn, taught the Mongols that even the greatest storm eventually breaks against the shore. The fathers who never came home. The letters never sent. The children who grew up without their protectors. They bought time. Time for walls to be built. Time for lessons to be learned. Time for civilization to survive. Remember them.